Hi, Tina Peters here.
See, today they go after you if you're investigating or thing.
What's going on, America? My name is Ivan Raiklin. For those that don't know, I am hosting the Tina Peters Show podcast. And for the next hour, I'm going to try to essentially articulate to those that may not be aware. Obviously, the audience that regularly watches this program is well aware of Tina's predicament and the embarrassing nature that our current government is in. And so basically over the next almost hour, I want to set the context as though you're hearing about her situation for the very first time in your entire life. Because let's just face it, now that X has opened up, Elon Musk is waking up in the process and learning about the corruption in our government, and he's doing it with his teams at Doge. Bobby Kennedy is also kind of learning about the other corruption in addition to the corruption that he's already exposed in terms of the medical component of it. And then you have other folks waking up, like the independent podcasters that are have a bigger, wider audience. And I'm referring to folks like the Joe Rogan audience. And so now that we're in a position to, essentially 4 years later, wake up those that were duped by the system. They were the ones that believed that it was a safe and secure, the most safe and secure election ever in the history of humanity, is what Chris Krebs told America when he testified before Senator Ron Johnson's hearing in December of 2020. And that was used as the quote, as the pithy quote by the radical left disinformation purveyors, whether it's MSLSD or the Criminal News Network. And then even on the right, the faux news disinformation purveyors, led by the Paul Ryans of the world that sit on the board of that organization. They all parroted Chris Krebs' words that it was the most safe and secure election ever in the history of humanity. Well, fast forward a few years, folks, and it wasn't so safe and secure now, was it? And it wasn't so safe and secure because, well, a lot of people started to wake up because of patriots that were coming out as whistleblowers, those that understood the system well enough and started to learn about the system to be able to expose its fraudulently manipulated infrastructure. And that one of those individuals, one of the most fearless individuals that exposed it, particularly at the county clerk level and the machine level, is Tina Peters. Now, before I continue on, I want to play a short clip. It's it's a movie called Selection Code. It's a documentary outlining the plight and the predicament of Tina Peters. So, Mr. Producer, let's play that, and then on the backside of that, we'll talk a little bit more and give a little bit more context.
Local criminal investigations into Mesa County Clerk Tina Peters' alleged voting machine security breaches continues.
If I asked you this question before the 2020 election, are these voting machines secure?
I would have said yes.
And after the election,
I would have said yes.
what changed?
Tina Peters admits she brought in a consultant to make a forensic copy of the Dominion voting system in Mesa County.
I continue to think that our voting machines are too vulnerable.
Voting machines in Georgia and Texas switch votes from one candidate to another.
Virtually every machine was broken into.
Ballot recording machines.
Voting machines.
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 Voting machines.
Voting machines.
Machines.
Machine.
Machines.
Machine.
Machines, which are vulnerable to being hacked.
There is no serious person out there who would suggest somehow that you could even rig America's elections.
We've seen no evidence that any of our voting systems have been tampered with.
The November 3rd election was the most secure.
It was the most secure.
Most secure election
in American history, period.
The process is very secretive.
These machines are built by private companies, which we don't have a right to know what goes on inside those.
What did you see during the software update?
We've uncovered something.
that they're afraid of.
We didn't consider the machines.
The information found there is the Rosetta Stone.
They made a mistake and left the evidence in the machine.
And you can hide it as well.
It's only what the programmer tells it to say.
It's literally like the difference between going from pickpocketing to credit card fraud.
These people are being selected, not elected.
It's about who gets to count the vote.
They break down my door, terrorize my family.
FBI, federal search warrant.
What do you remember?
Just my mom being handcuffed by the chief of police.
This is not what we do in America.
You could make it all go away, though. You just keep your mouth shut. You could have your life back.
Can't unsee what I've seen.
All right, so for those that haven't seen that movie, you can go to, I think the website is selectioncode.com, if I'm not mistaken, Mr. Producer, if you want to put that in there for people to see. It's approximately 1 hour that goes into the details of what occurred related to Tina Peters. Now, just to kind of flesh things out a little bit, specifically as it applies to Tina, but also more broadly. So we, at this point, know 4 years later, I mean, myself, Tina Peters, and others that have been in this election integrity fight have known this to be true for quite some time. But I want to recap. Keep in mind that with the Twitter files releases, the dozen or so plus Twitter files that have been released by Elon Musk via Michael Schellenberger, Matt Taibbi, Barry Weiss, it is showcased that an individual by the name of Jim Baker, the deputy general counsel over at Twitter 1.0, who prior to that was the FBI general counsel at the FBI's headquarters, who was the one that signed off on the illegal spying operation on Trump, was then that later placed at Twitter to go ahead and cover up anybody that was talking about the electoral heist of 2020. So let's back up. Plandemic is entered into the national and global conversation, also known as the Fauci-funded Wuhan Institute of Virology lab incident, meaning you had to conduct medical nose rape so that you would consume their promulgated products that were emergency use and that were all unsafe and ineffective. Face toilets, two-face toilets, medical nose rapes, they called it PCR tests, and then from there they called it what? The jabs, or they called them the vaccines, right? Anyway, that was the progression. Bottom line here is it created the frame so that states would run their elections not according to the state election law and not according to the federal constitutional requirement under Article 2 of our U.S. Constitution, where it was the state legislatures that pass laws that create the framework upon which people vote. On top of that, you have machines that decide the outcome of elections. So, plandemic creates election violations. And then guess what? There are rules and laws out there that mandate the retention of records, okay, of federal elections. 22-month retention period, so that in the event that there needs to be an investigation, audit, civil, criminal investigations of the electoral system, well, you would have them. What did Tina Peters do? She did exactly that. She had the understanding and intent to go ahead under that statute as an agent, essentially, of the federal government, because you got to keep in mind, most of these counties and states, they have the same system set up for their elections for local, county, statewide elections, House, Senate, governor, lieutenant governor. And then on top of that, their federal elections, meaning federal House, federal U.S. Senate, and then the federal president and vice presidential electoral allocation when it comes through that election process. That's what occurred in Colorado. So Tina Peters, being the Mesa County clerk in Colorado, thought that, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and preserve those records. What did the domestic terrorist left, now acting fake Secretary of State, Jenna Griswold, do to Tina Peters? Well, she, acting on behalf of the entire cabal, wanted to make an example of those individuals that exposed their corruption. And so the political persecution initiated. Then the prosecutions continued. And what happened subsequent to that? Well, it was, you know what? Rather than me saying it in a somewhat direct manner, let's play a video of me reading a letter that really lays out essentially the predicament of Tina Peters. And that's a clip that I sent you, Mr. Producer. I posted that yesterday on my X account, and it appears as though that's getting a little bit of traction. We should be around 100,000 views. And I think this needs to be 100 million views. And hopefully we can get this in front of Mr. Elon Musk so that we can, in the collective, come up with strategies, even if the strategies that I read off and articulate aren't maybe the best ways forward. I think if enough people are focused in on the predicament of political prisoner and political hostage Tina Peters, we're going to be able to come up with a solution in very short order before she is moved from the Larimer County Jail over to state-controlled facilities, because the Larimer County is controlled by a Republican sheriff, and the state facilities are obviously controlled by the domestic terrorist, radical leftist Jared Polis, the current, I guess they call him the governor of Colorado. So let's play the video and listen closely. Dear President Trump, over the past 4 years, you have repeatedly and correctly stated that the 2020 presidential election was rigged against you. Myself and many election experts know your claims are true because of the brave work that was done by former Mesa County, Colorado clerk and recorder Tina Peters. Mr. President, I know you are aware of the plight of Tina Peters because she is the only election official in America who had the foresight and courage to do her sworn duty to safeguard the 2020 federal election records she was responsible for maintaining as required by federal law. By doing so, Tina was essentially functioning as an agent of the federal government. Tina uncovered evidence that criminal federal election tampering was perpetrated by Colorado's Secretary of State Jenna Griswold, the same person who tried to keep your name off of the 2024 Colorado presidential election ballot. When Tina made that evidence public, she effectually became a federal government whistleblower. However, instead of being complimented by the federal government for her extraordinary efforts to preserve the federal election records she was elected to protect, the Federal Bureau of Investigation was weaponized against her, and they raided her home and confiscated her belongings. The government then wrongfully prosecuted, convicted, and sentenced Tina to an outrageous term of 9.5 years in prison, which began on October 3rd of 2024. Tina should be eligible for U.S. Department of Justice protection, if not a full presidential pardon under the U.S. Constitution's Article 6 Supremacy Clause and the Privileges and Immunities Clause of the 14th Amendment, as well as the Whistleblower Protection Act. She should also be entitled to federal protection because she reported evidence that the Secretary of State of Colorado, Griswold, had the Mesa County 2020 federal presidential election records altered, which is a federal felony. Either way, the U.S. Department of Justice has ample cause to conduct a federal investigation of Colorado Secretary of State Jenna Griswold, Colorado Attorney General Phil Weiser, District Attorney Daniel Rubenstein, Judge Matthew Barrett, former U.S. Attorney General Merrick Garland, and past FBI Director Christopher Wray, because they all colluded and conspired to persecute and prosecute Tina Peters for exposing federal election fraud that contributed to your loss of the 2020 presidential election. I continue. I want to make sure I'm not disclosing. Tina is nearly 70 years old and had one third of one of her lungs due to cancer. Removed. She recently tested positive for COVID, is malnourished, sleep deprived, and appears to be suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder from the repeated full body frisking and strip searches she has been subjected to by her jailers in Colorado. Tina is a Gold Star mother whose only U.S. Navy SEAL son gave his life serving our nation, and until this ordeal, she had never so much as received even a traffic ticket. The cruel and humiliating treatment and unjust confinement Tina is being forced to endure is a national disgrace that demands correction from a federal level. We are praying that one way or another, either you, Mr. President, and or the U.S. Department of Justice will order that Tina immediately be released from jail into the U.S. Federal Witness Protection Program before her fragile health declines any further or worse. Then she can assist with a federal investigation into the felonious federal election interference Tina revealed that led to her illegal imprisonment and your defeat in the 2020 presidential election. Respectfully, America. All right, let's summarize here. Plandemic ushered in. Illegal election conducted. January 6th joint certification. Illegally conducted by Mike Pence and Nancy Pelosi because there was no quorum. Joint certification complete, illegitimately and illegally, in order to usher in a successful, stolen, illegitimate election. From there, a cover-up continues, right? In order to cover up the stolen election and cover up the January 6th Fedsurrection. Thus, they create a Fedsurrection cover-up committee, right? That cover-up committee is led by a staff director who was one of the 51 spies who lied that used to work for John Brennan, the former CIA director, as the inspector general. As part of that program, that staff director, David Buckley, created a Patriot Purge list that Tucker Carlson was exposing. Put that in the back of your mind, the Tucker Carlson component. So the staff director, David Buckley, of the January 6th Fedsurrection Cover-Up Committee, does his 10 hearings, interviews 1,000 witnesses, and then makes the case via compelled, coerced, perjurious testimony, meaning lies of U.S. Capitol Police officers, Harry Dunn, Acanilo Ganell, a couple of Metropolitan Police Department officers, Michael Fanone, Daniel Hodges, others, David Lazarus, testimony from Julie Farnham, Yogananda Pittman, and many others, right? These are USCP folks. That they then bring in CCTV footage and manipulate it so that it looks like there was criminal activity by the patriots that they were trying to target, right? That evidence is compiled by the U.S. Capitol Police and the legislative branch at the behest of Pelosi and Schumer when they were leaders, and then sent over to the Department of Justice for further biased, manipulated curation, if you will. By whom? Merrick Garland, the acting fake attorney general, and Christopher Wray Epps. Some people know him as Christopher Wray, the FBI director. In addition to that, all of their surrogates over at the U.S. Attorney's Office, Matthew Graves, the U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia, and his lackeys, put together a case with that false, perjurious CCTV footage from the Capitol and the Capitol Police testimony, false, perjurious lies, that were compelled because these U.S. Capitol Police officers had a rap sheet for a record. And so they could be coerced into signing sworn affidavits to keep their jobs. Otherwise, their dirt would have been disclosed and fired, and they wouldn't have been able to get their retirement. Instead, they were offered book deals and a retirement. So fast forward, FBI agents, in addition to all these lies, go ahead and pull and scrub information off their surrogate platforms, Facebook, Twitter 1.0. Because keep in mind, it was the very senior leaders at the FBI that were the ones that were censoring content on these platforms. And it was up to them to decide, along with their partners over at DHS, CISA, to say what was misinformation, malinformation, and disinformation. Dismiss malinformation. DHS, DOJ through FBI, the Office of Director of National Intelligence, as they colluded and coordinated with their former colleagues, meaning the Twitter 1.0 general Deputy General Counsel Jim Baker, and the San Francisco field office of the FBI, as was disclosed through testimony of one of those officers of the FBI field office in San Francisco by the name of Elvis Chan in the Missouri v. Biden lawsuit. I digress. So that information was put together to go after the Patriots. So as that information was compiled, they had to also send off these lies and testimony, not only in federal court against the J6ers, but they also had to do so to stop the electors and basically make an example of the electors that voted for the Republican nominee because they expected that the courts would rule in the affirmative that yes, the Democrat electors that were allocated in Georgia, Wisconsin, Arizona, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Nevada, New Mexico were illegitimate because those allocations were done based on an illegally conducted elections. So they convened to conduct electoral college vote in those respective states. But no, the radical domestic terrorist left, led by David Buckley, staff director of the J6 committee, also coordinated with all these states to go ahead with the fellow domestic terrorist Democrats to go ahead and weaponize against the electors and one other person. That one other person in Colorado would be Tina Peters. So what I'm getting at here in this long kind of description and analysis from COVID pandemic to illegal election to January 6th Fedsurrection cover-up, and then the prosecutions that went and emanated from there, Tina Peters is an ancillary victim of the entire January 6th Fedsurrection cover-up op, meaning at the state level in Colorado, she was weaponized against because she was very instrumental in being able to expose the entire scam known as the election of 2020. Okay? I'll say this again. Tina Peters is a J6er because she refused to accept an illegal election, has been evidenced by many, okay? Whether you like it or not, Republicans, you now see that Mark Zuckerberg's Facebook spent $400 and over $400 in bribes to manipulate and steal the election in some places, right? In addition, there was censorship that took place. In addition, there was fraud. In addition, there was interference. In addition, there was machine shenanigans that were exposed by Tina Peters upholding her oath to retain records of federal elections under her responsibility as the clerk of Mesa County, Colorado. So this should make sense now that it was the Merrick Garlands, the Chris Rays, the Pelosi's, the Schumers, all of them worked hand in glove together to go after anybody that wouldn't bend to their lie. So if you bet to their lie and was like, yes, please mutilate my body with the products you're promulgating and you're telling everyone to consume on Fakebook, Instagarbage, CommieTube, CommieSearch. Sorry, some of you may not be familiar with these platforms. They're known as YouTube, Google Search, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter 1.0. It was the very agents that spied on Trump that decided to go ahead and continue lies about COVID, continue lies about the election, illegal election. Like all these people are the same people that weaponized against General Flynn, that weaponized against Carter Page, the spying on the Trump campaign on President Trump, and then subsequently all the January 6th defendants to include Tina Peters. Now, I get it. A lot of people are like, whoa, Tina Peters was prosecuted for a state crime. Yes, but that comes from what she was doing to defend federal elections. So I guess at the midpoint of this episode, before we take a break, When we come back, I want to talk about where we can go from here. Okay. So first we talked about what Tina Peters' situation is, what predicament she's in. She's currently rotting in prison. So we're going to go into that in a little bit more detail and what possible solutions can be had to get Tina Peters released as a political hostage in a county jail. Potentially, she's going to be moving, if we don't get her out in the next couple of weeks, over to a state prison. And who could play a very significant role in helping us release her before her demise continues and her frail state. I mean, she's almost 70. So we need to do everything in our power to be able to get her out. So let's take a break.
Hi, I'm Joe, Supreme Leader of DCF Guns. What is DCF Guns, you ask? We're the best damn gun store and range in the universe. Do we have guns? We have all the guns. We got small guns. We got big guns. We even have beastly guns. We offer all types of training, and we have 5 ranges across our 3 locations. I'm a good shot. And of course, we have all types of ammo. We even have flamethrowers. Woo! We offer incredible membership opportunities, and members save even more on guns, ammo, and accessories. Military, both active and retired, and first responders get up to 40% off memberships. Come join the DCF family today, where we keep the range hot and the deals hotter. It's hot.
In every thread, in every stitch, Honor-Bound USA weaves the fabric of the American spirit. It's not just apparel, it's a testament to God, family, and country. At Honor-Bound USA, we're a family of patriots who put our faith, family, and America first. When you visit our website, you'll find a line of products that embody our commitment to pray, stand, speak, and act.
As the official site for the Untamed podcast, all of our products proclaim speaking the truth with courage.
We also have the powerful documentary from Professor David Clements, Let My People Go. Identify yourself as one of the few who are willing to stand for what they believe in. Join the Honor-Bound USA family today. Wear it as a badge of honor, commitment to the values that shape us, and a pledge to the bright future we will build together. Because when you're honor-bound, you're not just wearing a brand, you're embodying a lifestyle. Do you want to get profits from the world's most productive oil basin? Bloomberg calls the Permian Basin the world's most important growth engine for oil production. Now there's a way for everyday investors to collect monthly checks from an incredible oil hotspot. It's not a stock, and it's not an ETF. Instead, you can actually own royalty rights on over 380,000 acres of prime oil and gas fields. The best part? 95% of all income from this investment gets paid directly to investors like you. You can simply sit back and collect the royalty checks month after month. You can get started with just $25 through any brokerage account. Visit oilboom2025.com to learn more about the opportunity from the Oxford Club's Chief Income Strategist, Mark Lichtenfeld. That's oilboom2025.com to learn how to start collecting Permian Basin oil royalties today.
All right, we are back on the Tina Peters show, known as The Truth Matters. So before the break, we talked about the context of why Tina Peters is a political hostage in Colorado. I failed to mention, I believe it was Jenna Griswold, and Mr. Producer, correct me if I'm wrong, was the president or the chair, whatever you call it, of the secretaries of state in America at the time when good old Chris Krebs was the CISA director. And so it would be very important for the Secretary of State of Colorado, Jenna Griswold, to defend the entire electoral corruption that she is essentially spearheading, right? And so that's another reason why she had to go after someone that was in a very strong position to expose Jenna's corruption. Okay. That's another component to keep in mind. Also, keep in mind, which I haven't talked about this in quite some time. Remember, there was a settlement between faux news. Some people pronounce Fox News, but there was a settlement. I've heard other people pronouncing that as a bribe. Other people pronounce it as a payoff. Other people pronouncing it as an investment, but whatever. It was called a settlement by the parties that faux news would essentially remove Tucker Carlson and stop him from exposing the Patriot Purge and the Fedsurrection and its subsequent Fedsurrection cover-up. In return, this machine company that Tina Peters was exposing would receive some money from faux news. Okay. Well, last I checked, I think if you go and follow the finances, both companies have some of the same investors in them. So it begs the question, same person move money from one pocket to the other? Something to keep in mind. Is that the settlement that you're bringing up on the screen, Mr. Producer? Yeah, faux news agrees to pay deviant voting systems to the tune of $800 million. Interesting how that works. And interesting how it was the day before Tucker Carlson was going to air his interview with the former Capitol Police Chief, Stephen Sund, where he would have disclosed some information about how Paul Ryan's fingerprints and Nancy Pelosi's fingerprints were all over the January 6th Fedsurrection. How do I know this, folks? Let's just say that I had a very long lunch a week or two before that interview that he did with Tucker Carlson, laying out my investigation and what I had found out and the relationships of how this was a total political incitement, instigation / entrapment by Pelosi and company, and how Paul Irving, the House Sergeant at Arms, was the Sergeant at Arms for Paul Ryan. Another thing to remember as I look through my messages here. Looky what we have here. I need to send this to you, Mr. Producer, because it's so important to address. When you look at the Capitol Police Board and how they weaponized against all J6ers, and to include downstream from that Tina Peters, they did it in a very clever, incestuous, generational, corrupt manner. Why don't you pull up this slide that I just sent you? Capitol Police Board, from coup to cover up. And I want you to focus in on who the current chair of the Capitol Police Board is. Well, it's the Senate Sergeant at Arms. Her name is Jennifer Hemingway. And as far as I could tell, my sources tell me, and we'll have to look this one up to confirm it. The current Senate Sergeant at Arms under John Thune, the Senate Majority Leader, instead of having someone that they could pick that would expose the Fedsurrection, expose the communications of the Capitol Police Board, they opted to pull in Jennifer Hemingway, which happens to so be Paul Ryan's chief of staff when he was the Speaker of the House. So while everyone's talking about like, oh, how great it is, pardons this, pardons that, this is the very, like, all the indicators show that the swamp is real, and they're continuing to run circles around the administration. And a lot of, I think, influencers out there don't talk about this, possibly because they're in on the cover up and the limited hangout. And it won't be until many people realize that Paul Ryan still has a foothold and a stronghold on everything related to January 6th never being exposed. Nothing about the criminalization and the weaponization against those J6ers, to include Tina Peters. They're not going to do anything about it, because once we hear and understand the story of January 6th, the pipe bombers and everything, and we see that Paul Ryan's fingerprints are all over it, that means a lot of prominent Republicans were in on it. That's problematic, isn't it? So, to kind of close with this little section here, let's go back to that slide, because I think to contextualize this, I think it's better if we have that slide up. So right now we have the president, Donald Trump. But every single J6 investigation and weaponization that took place subsequent and downstream from those J6 investigations, whether it's the Jackass Smith trial, some people pronounce Jack Smith, special counsel, whether it's the Fulton Fani Willis case in Georgia, Fulton County, Georgia, whether it's the Alvin Bragg case in Manhattan, whether it's the electors cases in Georgia, Wisconsin, Arizona, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Nevada, and New Mexico. The driving force behind all those political weaponization and lawfare, it emanates from right here, the Speaker's office, the Senate Majority Leader's office, through their sergeants at arms, who consist of 2/3 of the Capitol Police Board, that then decides who the Capitol Police Chief is, right there, Tom Manger. And then downstream from that, you have the General Counsel of the U.S. Capitol Police that's putting together all those perjurious sworn testimony and manipulated doctored CCTV footage before it being sent over to the DOJ for actioning by U.S. Attorney Matt Graves, and before there's a little bit of bias attached to it with what FBI pulls in from Facebook and Insta garbage and Twitter 1.0 as they make the case before the jury or the judge in D.C., or in the case of Tina Peters, as they motivate Jenna Griswold and the judge and the AG and everybody else involved in that to go ahead and make Tina look like the worst person ever in the history of humanity. Meanwhile, she was just doing her job to retain election records, and those election records happen to prove the corrupt nature of those elections, which put at risk every single person in the system, both left and right. That's why you don't have many Republicans, or maybe any Republicans, coming to Tina's defense, except for maybe a few, very small number. So what do we do from here? The big question is, how do we get Tina Peters out? And how do we improve the situation? I think that this is because it was a political charge, it can only be unraveled politically. So one option is you apply enough motivation on Jared Polis, the current governor of Colorado, to release her because of her frail condition. The chances of that, well, I guess anything can happen. That's one methodology. Another methodology is these people only respond to shame, pain, and money loss. So on the money loss front, how about the federal government does not allocate any funds to Colorado until the agent of the federal government that was exposing, that was retaining the records as per federal law is released. That's one methodology. But I don't have the answers, or maybe the best answer in this circumstance. My role here is to get as many people to understand this as possible so that they can contemplate through their knowledge, expertise, and network of what would be the best path to finally get her released. And she has attorneys that are working the issue. The Department of Justice is aware of the situation. Some prominent folks like Steve Bannon is aware. General Flynn, Mike Lindell had a meeting a couple weeks ago in late February with President Trump about this very activity. But herein lies the problem, is that the DOJ has to prioritize this. And right now we have an attorney general by the name of Pam Bondi. So Pam Bondi is really good at supporting and promoting and making money for Paul Ryan because she constantly goes on Faux News to do interviews with Paul Ryan's little lackey, Sean Hannity. So Pam Bondi, the Attorney General, goes and every day she comes on to Faux News and reports. Guess what, America? Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for your attention. We can now sell products to you. And now that we've sold you products from Big Pharma via the commercials, because you're tuned in, I wanted to remind you that I, as the Attorney General, have still not released any new information related to the Epstein files. Thanks for tuning in. Tune in tomorrow as I tell you the same thing. Okay? So that's kind of what she's been focused in on. And good old AG Bondi just announced, I don't know, a couple hours ago, Mr. Producer, why don't you pull up her tweet that I just sent you, where it's 2 hours ago. Attorney General Pamela Bondi states, looking forward to welcoming POTUS to the Department of Justice tomorrow. It appears as though President Trump is like, you embarrassed me, Pam. You said on multiple occasions that you're going to have some information about the Epstein files. You even had the gall to hand out binders to some key influencers. For full disclosure, all those influencers that got a binder, I either know and like and appreciate their work, or I don't know, but still like and appreciate their work. So they were duped by Pam Bondi thinking, because they didn't even know what were in the binders. They were there for another meeting that was contemplated well before any of the Epstein kind of conversations were happening. They, whether it's DC Draino or some of the other ones, they posted up. And they're duped by our very own Attorney General thinking that they have new information and more information regarding the Epstein client list. So my guess is one of the reasons why Tina Peters has not yet been released is because the Attorney General and the Department of Justice still doesn't consider it to be important to release a January 6th affiliated political hostage. Well, that's where we come into play. We expose and demand that it become a priority. Okay? So, how do we make it a priority? I'm going to close with this. My guess, or my assessment, that President Trump is going to visit Pam Bondi, not at Faux News, where she has pretty much been camping out the last few weeks since she became the Attorney General, but he's going to visit her at where she's supposed to show up to work, at the Department of Justice. And let's just go ahead and play the video to summarize what I think is going to take place. Play that video that was underneath that tweet that I just sent you, Mr. Producer, and crank up that volume.
Which is, if you allow it, you will encourage more of it. If you allow people to get away with things that are completely over the top and outrageous, and you do nothing about it, you're going to get more of it. It's not good for you, and it's not good for them. No. There has to be a point at which Dad comes home. Yeah, that's right. Dad comes home. And he's pissed. Dad is pissed. He's not vengeful. He loves his children. Disobedient as they may be, he loves them. Because they're his children, they live in his house. But he's very disappointed in their behavior. And he's going to have to let them know. He's going to have to get to your room right now and think about what you did. And when Dad gets home, you know what he says? You've been a bad girl. You've been a bad little girl, and you're getting a vigorous spanking right now. And no, It's not going to hurt me more than it hurts you. No, it's not. I'm not going to lie. This is going to hurt you a lot more than it hurts me. And you earned this. You're getting a vigorous spanking because you've been a bad girl. And it has to be this way. It has to be this way because it's true. And you're only going to get better when you take responsibility for what you did. That's not said in the spirit of hate. It's not said in the spirit of vengeance or bigotry. Far from it. It's said in the spirit of justice, which is the purest and best thing there is. And without it, things fall apart.
Mr. President, Attorney General Pam Bondi, every other employee within the Department of Justice, if you were in Tina Peters' shoes, what would you want the Attorney General, the President to do in your predicament? You have a lot of resources. You have federal resources and capabilities that can come to bear in guaranteeing Tina Peters' freedom. And what I mean by that is kind of piggybacking off of what Tucker Carlson just said, is that if you allow them to continue to do the criminal, belligerent, treasonous activity, they're going to continue to do it. If you don't do anything and just call it bad and there are no consequences, they're going to continue to do it. The only way to stop their criminality, Jenna Griswold and the entire J6 Fedsurrection crew, is you have to exercise the maximum legal, moral, and ethical capabilities at your disposal. And that requires courage, something that we the people are trying to motivate you into exhibiting. So with that, I'm going to close and ask everybody to go ahead and talk about Tina Peters' situation on the platforms that you have, particularly X, Rumble, Truth, so that it gets before Elon Musk, President Trump, so that they can go ahead and say, you know what? Let's make this a priority. Let's finish off the pardons that were done and release all J6 political prisoners, to include those affiliates that were weaponized against because they also were trying to fight and stop an illegal election from being conducted and create consequences for those bad actors, and also stop illegal elections from being conducted in the future. Tina Peters, tip of the spear. Everyone needs to focus on coming up with the methodology for her release. With that, that's all I got. Thanks, Tina, for allowing me to host your show. And hopefully next time that I'm on this show, I pray that you will be hosting it and I will be a guest celebrating your freedom. God bless, Tina.
Hi, Tina Peters here.
See, today they go after you if you're investigating.
Yeah.
Sort of thing.